another David Price comeback. I'm Teekosey, and this is with just 15 defeats. I'm Teekosey, and welcome to another round of With Just 15 Defeats. In today's show, we're going to be discussing David Price and his next fight. So thanks for joining me here on the channel. I hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please give us a big thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, click the subscribe button. Additionally, in the top right hand corner, shortly there will be a poll which will pop up. I would be very grateful if you could participate in that. All you have to do is click on it and click yes or no. It doesn't take you away from the video. It's very, very simple. Also, if you've got any comments on this fight that we're going to be discussing, anything on David Price, I really want to hear from you. So go down to the bottom, go to the comment section and type something for me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So as I say, in today's show, we're going to be discussing David Price. He's going to be fighting this Sunday on the Tony Bellew undercard. He's been put in with a guy called Vaclav Pejsar, I believe it's pronounced. David Price obviously hasn't fought for a while, so it's an interesting, because David Price does have something to offer. So David Price, he's got a record of 19 victories, 3 defeats. He's got 16 KO wins and 3 KO defeats. Now, David Price, he came to prominence about 5 years ago, really, when he steamrolled through the British scene in devastating fashion. He went through a period of about 1 year where he basically knocked out in devastating fashion a number of the kind of British level guys. So we saw him go in with the undefeated Tom Dallas at the time, absolutely took his head off. Then John McDermott, Sam Sexton, Audley Harrison, Matt Skelton, these guys, right? So he dispatched them relatively easy. He showed his immense power to stop these guys. And then he ran into trouble. And he ran into trouble when he fought Tony Thompson twice. He lost both of these fights. Both defeats by stoppage. The first one relatively early, got hit behind the ear and he kind of just went to jelly. The second time he was stopped a little bit later in the fight. He was stopped on his feet, actually, if I remember correctly. Just completely ran out of gas. So he then kind of, he had to reevaluate himself, but he came back, he signed up with Sauerland, and they gave him a run of fights against nobodies, really. And then last year, he ran into Erkan Teper, another undefeated guy, and Erkan Teper just turned his lights off completely, right? Now, what happened is that sometime last year it was announced, it was revealed that both these guys had tested positive for performing enhancing drugs at the time of these fights. So this does change the view on David Price to a certain extent. Maybe not the fact that he lost or the fact that he can be defeated, but the fact that he lost in an unfair battle. And we never like to see that. We never like to see this thing. We want to see we want it to see everything even. And he's kind of been robbed of the path of his career, because if he'd fought other guys, if he'd never fought Tony Thompson, for instance, fought someone else, people may laugh, but David Price could have ended up becoming a world champion. He could have got one when the titles were fractured. He could have picked up one of these belts. It's possible. It's more than plausible. The only thing I will say that doesn't change is that David Price has received 3 KOs, one of which was life altering. I say this is what I always say. Some of these KOs, sometimes when they're that devastating, when you're wiped out completely, that can be life altering. It changes your mindset. And I always remember Carl Froch saying when Amir Khan got knocked out, I think it was against Garcia, I think, Froch basically said that Amir Khan should retire. He should retire because he got just clean wiped out. And it's so bad. If you get beaten in such devastating fashion, have you got what it takes? He kind of said something along those lines. But anyway, now when I was thinking about producing this video today, I thought about a video that I produced really early in my channel when I first started out, and it was actually a video on the Tepper fight. I did it quite a way after the fight had happened, and the reason why I did it was because of the news that Tepper had failed the test, and I thought it had some relevance, right? And obviously that was last year. We've now waited all this time for Price to actually get back in the ring, make an announcement that he's fighting. And I actually made I made a point on that video when I was trying to explain about what Price has got, and I said that for a heavyweight boxer, there's 4 key attributes that you kind of need if you're going to be successful, if you're going to make it to the top, right? And those 4 things are: you need a way of making your opponent respect you, right? You need an ability to keep the distance. You need to be active throughout the fight, and you need to be able to tire out your opponent. Okay, so there's other things like chin resistance and stamina and all this sort of stuff, range of skills and all that sort of you can think about, but I think they're not necessarily that important to win. We've seen guys with no chin make it, right? You see Vladimir Klitschko been knocked out 3 times, but then because of the way that he changed his style, he was able to reduce the likelihood of being knocked out, right? So when you look at David Price, has he got a way of making his opponents respect him? He's got sick power. He's got crazy one-punch power that not every heavyweight has. So he has that. He has that crazy power. Can he keep the distance? Well, he's a huge guy. This is like, he's one of the bigger guys in the heavyweight division. He's a genuine super heavyweight. He's got massive arms. He's gigantic. He's got everything to do. He's got sound boxing skills. Doesn't necessarily always take advantage of it, and it's something that he needs to work on. But he has a decent jab, and he can keep the distance. Now, the other 2 things, being active and tiring out your opponent, these 2 are kind of connected to stamina. And some people say that David Price does have a stamina issue, but these are things that he can work on. These are things that he can work on. So he has kind of the basis of being a top guy, right? And just going back to what I just said about the fact about the chin situation, because people will always say that David Price doesn't have a chin, and because he doesn't have a chin, he's always going to have a problem. He's always going to have a problem. Now, what I would say is I just briefly spoke about Froch talking about Khan. Now, Khan has this reputation of having no chin. He's been knocked out 3 times, I think it's 3 times, in devastating fashion, right? But he's still a multiple weight, multiple world champion. He made it there. And how did he make it there? He's got crazy fast hands, fantastic movement. So his opponents are wary of him. They have to respect him because of what he can do, the way that he can close the distance and via rapid combinations very quickly. He can keep the distance on a similar thing. He's incredibly active, point scoring, winning rounds, and he can tire out his opponent. So he has these four things. I know he's not heavyweight, whatever, but he has these abilities to easily win matches and fights, and that's what you need to think about, right? Amir Khan can be knocked out by anyone, but he's been a world champion. I reckon he can become a world champion again. I would fancy him against a lot of people. But there you go. What David Price needs to do, he needs to. Well, he's never going to be able to increase his punch resistance. He's never going to be able to increase his punch resistance, but he's going to be able to increase or perfect his ability to defend. Now, we've spoken in recent weeks about the fact that in heavyweight division, a lot of guys out there, a lot of top guys, their defense is pretty weak. It is pretty weak, and it's something that all the guys need to work on. Obviously, some people are going to have better punch resistance. They're going to have a great chin, so they're going to be able to take a bit of damage. Some guys are not. They're going to be blown over by a sneeze, which is possibly where David Price is. But as I kind of alluded to with Klitschko, he kind of changed it up. He developed a style, and if I was David Price, or if I was advising David Price, I would lock him in a room and say, look, mate, you need to watch the YouTube videos of Klitschko all day long until it sinks into your brain, because the style of Klitschko would work perfect for David Price, because he has all the natural attributes. He just needs to work out a way of boxing clever, defending himself, because he has that natural equalizer, the one punch KO that not everyone's got. Not everyone is got. And another thing I'd noticed was that one thing I've always said about David Price is that whilst he's massive and he's like 250, he's 250 and he's like 6'8" or something. When you look at him, he always looks a bit. Well, I know he's pasty as hell, right? But he looks like he's thin. I can never quite work out what it was. He just looks like he needs a good meal. Like, I know he must eat like a horse, but there's something about him where he kind of, like, his central core just never looks that big. And I've always thought that he needs to put on weight. Now, the fact that he's 250, he's a big guy. Definitely a big guy. He's in cracking shape every time. But I've always thought he needs to kind of bulk up a bit, get a bit more muscular. Because he's quite light on his feet. He's got okay movement. We know he's stiff as hell. But, yeah. So if he could put on a little bit of weight, maybe like 15, 20 pounds, get up to the 260 mark, I think he'd probably have a... it would put him in good stead. Because he's not going to be overweight. He's not going to be podgy. Just because of the frame that he has. The other thing he needs to think about, and this has been a problem. If you watch those fights, the Tony Thompson ones, he had his man in trouble. But he blew himself out. He blew himself out trying to get the stoppage. He wasn't able to. So in the fights that he's won punched. He's knocked these guys out, and that's it. But in the Tony Thompson, in both those fights, he kind of went for it. He went all out for quite a period of time, and he ran out of gas. And that's kind of how those fights kind of went downhill. Yeah, I know he got hit around the ear and whatever, but it was the kind of the onslaught that he performed just wasn't an effective onslaught, and I think it really drained him. So I think that's another thing that I would have thought that he should be working on. That when he goes in for the kill, he's more accurate. All that sort of stuff. Now, let's just quickly talk about the opponent, Vaclav Pejsar. He's going to be the smaller guy. Most guys are going to be the smaller guy against David Price. There's going to be a 4-inch height advantage for Price, and also a reach and general size. The guy seems to weigh in around about the 220 mark, maybe 230. So there's going to be like a 30 to 40 pound discrepancy on the weight situation. So the guy is up against it. But we saw there was a size discrepancy with Erkan and Erkan knocked him out. He got in close because David Price allowed him to get in close. That was the problem. He wasn't keeping the distance. He has everything to be able to keep the distance, but he did not keep him at distance, right? So this guy, Pejsar, I think he's a reasonable guy. He's a reasonable guy, but the 2 times that he's fought anyone decent, so he's got a record of 9-2, right? 9 wins, 2 defeats, right? The 2 times that he's fought anyone remotely adequate is against Rudenko and Schwartz. Schwartz is a young, up-and-coming guy, undefeated, fights in a couple of weeks against another undefeated guy. Rudenko, he's lost a couple of times. He's lost to Hugh Fury, he's lost to someone else. I can't think of it at the moment. But yeah, so these 2 guys, they're kind of, we'll call them, both of them prospects, and he's fought guys, and he's been comprehensively beaten on decision. Hasn't been knocked out, but he's been comprehensively beaten. Like, I think it was the one-sided beatdowns, right? One-sided defeats. So that's what I say. He's got 8 KO wins of his 9, but you look at his opponents that he's fought. He's literally, those 9 wins, there's no one remotely decent. No one remotely decent. He fought Alamabinwo, British guy who has he failed a drugs test some years ago, and then he went on a run of, he's lost about 15 in a row. Never that great to start with, and that fight is on YouTube, and Alamabinwo just kind of pulls in the towel. Now, also recently, this Pejsar, he fought a guy who weighed in at 250 pounds and was only about 5'6", right? And I just looked through this guy's record, because when I saw he was so short, I thought, this is weird. This is weird. I looked through his record, and about 6-7 years ago, this guy fought Matt Macklin at light middle, coming at 150. So he's 100 pounds heavier than he once was in his professional career, and it was a bit of a joke fight anyway. And this Pejsar got the victory. Now, what has Pejsar got to offer? Very basic, very limited. He's gonna fight with a high guard. There isn't going to be a volume of punches. He's going to come in shape, I think. From what I've seen of all the videos you can see on YouTube, he's going to come in shape, and he's going to be game. I think he's going to be a game opponent. I think he's going to be limited in what he has to offer. I've seen a few people say that they think this is a tricky fight. This is an awkward. This is a banana skin. Yeah, someone said it was a potential banana skin. From what I've seen, I don't think that's the case. I think that David Price will stop him very, very easily, and it will be another one of these knockout victories that he had around 5 years ago, when he was just one-punching people. It's going to be the same. I don't put any merit in this guy. As I say, he's only had 11 fights in his career since he's been a pro. He's only been a pro for 2 years, so he's relatively inexperienced, but despite that, he's been in with 2 guys who have taken in the distance. But I don't know, I just think David Price, the size, he's going to be up. It's a massive night, Goodison Park. I think David Price is going to get the victory. I just believe, that's what I think. Thanks for joining me on the video. Remember to take part in the poll, and if you've got any comments, leave them below. I've been Teekosey. This is with just 15 defeats.